The Nerdcast Empire is on the air for week number 2 of our podcast, and tonight we are reviewing SummerSlam. In fact, it has just ended, so we're going to have a chance to review SummerSlam, really just fresh thoughts right as soon as the pay-per-view ended. And I'm joined by the whole crew tonight. In fact, I've got 2 people here in studio. Mike joining us in studio tonight. Mike, how's it going?
It is going.
It's good. It's better than not going, of course.
That is all I got.
And joining us in studio is Rachel. Rachel?
I'm here. I'm good.
She's still awake, so
I am.
We're good to go. And joining us via the magic of technology from parts unknown is Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Oh, it's going all right. I'm surprised I'm awake as well.
None of us are ever up this late anymore. We're all getting old. But we were kept awake by SummerSlam, which is wrapped up, and want to go ahead and just throw this disclaimer out before we get started. Obviously, this is a pay-per-view review, so there will be spoilers. So if you are planning on watching SummerSlam at some point early in the week on Peacock, you might want to turn this podcast off because we're going to go down the results. We're going to give our thoughts on the main matches and kind of run through some of the other ones as well. So
This isn't a prediction.
it is a spoiler.
It's a spoiler.
Quite the pay-per-view event just wrapped up, and we're going to start with the end of the pay-per-view with the main event that just wrapped up. It is Roman Reigns, who remains the tribal chief. He remains the undisputed Universal Champion, defeating Jey Uso. They spear through the table in 36:03, and of course, it doesn't really do the result justice. It appeared that Jey Uso had the match won when a hooded figure dragged him out of the ring. Turned out to be his brother Jimmy, who then super kicked him, tossed him back in the ring, and Roman Reigns finished him off. We'll get Mike's thoughts first. Mike, what are your thoughts on the match overall and the finish as well?
Do we know for sure there's not another brother that just happens to look exactly like Jimmy and Jay? I mean, that's a possibility, right?
I guess so. I guess we don't know that for sure.
Yeah, I obviously still a lot of questions. Any match like that is always a bit awkward for me because the second you have no disqualifications, you just wonder why, when your tribal chief has backup from the beginning, is it not already just a total mess with him coming out and interfering? Solo, I'm referring to. Otherwise, I didn't really believe that Jay was going to be the one. So it was really just a matter of how they were going to get there. As I kind of mentioned live as it was happening, they showed Roman looking surprised at the result. So there's clearly going to be more behind this. And even though I understand why people would think that the bloodline story is kind of getting stale and played out, I'm still interested to see where they're going to go from here.
Yeah, no question about it. Rachel, your thoughts?
I agree completely with Mike. I think the bloodline storyline has been so intriguing from day one. And it's just, I cannot wait to see what happens this week, even on SmackDown, to find out where they go, why Jimmy did what he did after he pretty much was the first one kicked out. And then Jay joined him. So I wonder where they're going from here.
Chris, how do you kind of weigh what you saw? Especially, I think, like Mike mentioned, that look from Roman there at the end definitely seemed to be confusion, not somebody who was happy that his backup plan happened to pay off for him at the very end.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more story to tell. I'm right there with Mike as far as we kind of knew. I can't say knew what the outcome was going to be, but we pretty well predicted that Jay wasn't going to come out on top. It was more about the journey there. But I think aside from some kind of iffy spots, it was kind of weird in a no DQ match that we got to wait to carry him all the way back to the ring. But I think it was a great match, and I think they really did do well at making Jay seem strong in a singles competition. My only worry is where him and Jimmy are going to end up after this is all said and done and the dust settles, whether, they're still going to be if they're going to reconcile, be in tag contention again, or if they're going to have to fare both of them in singles competition by themselves.
And I think one thing you will say about this bloodline storyline is that it's done such a great job of elevating so many talents. Obviously, both of the Usos, who are really seen as a really good tag team, but not in serious consideration for singles titles. I think you view them both differently. And that also goes for guys like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, and even Cody Rhodes, as it turns out, is on a totally different planet. We'll get to his match a little bit later on. But I think the 2 questions I want to pose, Mike, is number one, and you brought this up off the air, is somebody calling the shots? Is there a higher power, if you will? And number 2,
It was me all along.
I knew it. I knew that's why we started this podcast. It was you all along. And number 2, where does Roman Reigns go from here? Because obviously it appears that the Uso issue may be just amongst themselves, at least for the time being. So what's next for Reigns? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as far as someone else calling the shots, even from the beginning of this tribal chief Roman Reigns story arc, it was always that sense of, are you really the tribal chief? Because I'm pretty sure you have a relative that is the highest paid actor in Hollywood. If it came down to it, I'm pretty sure he's head of the table. Just guessing. I don't know if that's the direction they're going to go from here, but I think that's always an option.
I think you may be right there, and it could very well be tied into what's next for Roman Reigns. Rachel, your thoughts on just the fallout from that match, and where do we go from here with the Universal title reign, which has gone well past 1,000 days now?
I mean, someone's got to eventually beat him. I don't know. I mean, aside from, like Mike said, possibly a very high paid actor relative of him, but who was going to do it? I mean, Cody didn't do it last year. I mean, you've had Sami Zayn. I mean, you've had so many multiple competitors against him, and nobody's able to do it. And how are they going to be able to do it? Because there's always someone there to help him.
And what's interesting is that high paid actor, The Rock, of course, he's got his hands tied up a little bit with the XFL as well. But with the Hollywood strikes going on right now, you just think he might have a little bit more free time to come in and make an appearance. Chris, your thoughts on kind of where this is going, or where you would like to see it go maybe here in the near future?
Yeah, honestly, I can't think of a name right now, at least in WWE, where with the people they've had lose to Roman Reigns so far, to make it believable for someone to beat him. I almost think you have to branch out to another company, maybe bring in some more outside folks, kind of like the Cody Rhodes match that you had. And I mean, that could be great for the business. It's been great that, like we said, they've elevated other singles wrestlers like Jey Uso. So I think, like you said, I don't really believe that the storyline's getting stale. I think it's building up the right characters, and maybe we'll see some new faces in the company.
That's also a very, very real possibility. And obviously the ratings, the attendance has been off the charts, and over 50,000 tonight. I know they announced 59,000. I think the official ticket sales were just shy of 51,000, but it's hard to argue with how hot the product is right now. And a lot of that has been this Bloodline storyline that's getting 30 minutes to an hour of television each and every week, and people don't seem to be getting tired of it.
We got to see firsthand how quickly the pay-per-views were selling out the other day.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And SmackDown, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time really not that long ago where live TV shows were drawing very poorly. It was kind of a running joke. And now these events, and you mentioned something selling out quickly, it was Survivor Series and SmackDown combined in Chicago. And mind you, AEW is running Chicago around that same time of year. Of course, they run Chicago about every other week, but people just ate those tickets up. And again, that's with no matches announced. That's with no idea who might be what champion by the time we get there. It's just people buying it based on the product just being red hot right now. And it's going to make them a lot of money because the TV deals are coming down the pike. So we'll see how that goes. So that was the main event of the show. We're going to get to the semi-main event. I know Chris was a little bit occupied during the semi-main event. We'll get back to him in a moment. We talk a little bit about the World Heavyweight Championship match, but Asuka, Bianca Belair, and Charlotte Flair, kind of a tough spot there. Semi-main event between two world title men's matches. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about who's not on the card for SummerSlam with the Trish Stratus and Becky Lynch match and Rhea Ripley. Those top level stars not being on the card, but overall, Asuka, Bianca Belair, and Charlotte Flair certainly did their best to carry it. Belair gets the win with the title win over Asuka in 20 minutes, 42 seconds with a roll up, but didn't last very long, even lasted shorter than her title reign 2 years ago at SummerSlam when Io Sky came in, cashed in the Money in the Bank contract, winning with the over the moonsault to win her first WWE Championship. We'll start with Rachel this time. Your thoughts on first the triple threat match and then the aftermath.
Well, I honestly did not. I didn't really know who was going to win. I had Asuka winning when I made my predictions. I just like seeing her as champion, but I think they did a great job in the match. I think Belair with her injury was a little much. She didn't need it. Like I think we mentioned during the show, someone mentioned she could just be put in the figure 4 or figure 8 for like 5 minutes. But why, instead of all that, trying to get her out of the ring, getting her out down the ramp like 5 feet until she came back in the ring. But yeah, I mean, I like Bianca. I didn't expect her to win. I was hoping for Asuka, but very happy for Io. Like you mentioned when we were watching it, she was getting ready to leave a year ago. And she came back and now she's champion, and the pop for Dakota Kai coming back was fantastic. I love her too. I'm just so happy for Io. I think she's incredible.
Certainly a big moment for Io Sky. I think a big moment as well for WWE's interest in Joshi wrestling. And of course, the news that also kind of leaked out tonight, and some of the dirt sheets reporting that Kairi Sane may be on her way back to WWE. She's supposed to have an announcement. Probably by the time this podcast posts, that announcement will already be out. So we'll know for sure one way or another. But Damage Control's an interesting group because obviously they're supposed to be heels. And certainly what Bayley did on the way to the ring with the briefcase was not a babyface move, clearing everybody out. But Io Sky has always been very popular. She's another one of those, I think you've talked about before, Mike, wrestlers who maybe sometimes feel underutilized, and therefore the fans rally behind those wrestlers. And the pop for her winning, the pop for Dakota Kai, who's another wrestler, kind of falls in that category. It certainly made a big moment there after the cash in and championship win.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people would love a reason to cheer for Damage Control as a whole. I think in a lot of ways, you can look at Bayley as kind of being the other of the 4 horsewomen sometimes, where she maybe isn't given the respect that she has due. And obviously fans have loved Io Shirai or Io Sky and Dakota Kai for a while now. So that's just, the feud currently with Shotzi is going to be, they're going to have to get through that. But I don't see any reason to not just let Damage Control at some point turn back face. Kind of the thing you mentioned earlier about some of the names who weren't on SummerSlam tonight. And I think it kind of speaks to a weird problem that I don't think WWE has had in a while, where you almost have too many stars that you want to see on these shows where you can't book them all, or else someone's going to feel shortchanged. If you had Becky Lynch and Trish Stratus wrestle for a 7-minute match with a goofy finish or something, you would feel cheated. I think the same with Rhea Ripley. You want her out there in a similar match to like the triple threat that we saw for the title. And I think if you don't give them that, you almost start thinking, why are they even on the show?
And I think that you want to point to one thing that Triple H has done well, even back to his NXT days, was having limited match takeovers, having limited match pay-per-views, because it allows you to give proper time to those matches, give them 15 to 20 minutes to tell the story, instead of, like you said, having a 5-minute match or having a weird finish because you're just trying to shoehorn something in. And I even saw where Zoe Stark was doing media for SummerSlam and basically said, they know what they're doing. This is the right call. They can give that match 20 minutes on Raw in a couple weeks in Canada, and it'll be fine, rather than giving it 7 minutes on this pay-per-view and feeling like, well, there needs to be another match. And this match should be the blow off. You can't rush it through a 7-minute match.
And I also think when we were talking about the ticket sales earlier for SmackDown and Survivor Series, if people are going to be treating Raw and SmackDown like a hot ticket, you have to then give them big matches as a result. Like, you're kind of forcing their hand that some of these matches can be on your weekly TV, and it's not considered just casting them off.
We mentioned it, and we will mention it next week on our wrestling podcast when we talk about it. Monday Night Raw was almost unwatchable for a while because matches would be very short, nonsense finishes, rematches week after week, no continuity one week to the next, or even one show to the next. That's all gone now. Monday Night Raw, it's still too long, but it is cohesive now, and you have good main events like that Viking Rules match a couple weeks ago. It's becoming must-see TV, not just on television, but in person as well. You got to go experience it live. So it's interesting to see. But Io Sky cashes in. Like you said, Damage Control certainly in an interesting place. Really interested to see where they go from here. I still want to see the one-on-one match between Asuka and Io Sky, especially because Asuka's days, you don't know how much longer she's going to wrestle or want to wrestle in the States, because obviously she's getting a little bit older and longer in the career. So you don't want to miss the opportunity to do that match in a WWE ring if you get the chance.
Absolutely.
So we'll see how that goes. Great triple threat match. It was kind of slow build. Again, the injury to Belair, I understand why they did it, because they were trying to protect her on the cash in. But in the end, I don't know that it was necessarily pertinent to the way it all ended up. So we'll see where that storyline goes.
Ideally, just the result of that match alone should have put you in a position where you could be cashed in on. It didn't require, in my opinion, an injury to justify it.
I agree with that. I mean, you're talking about 3 top level stars. If you're facing 2 of them for 20 minutes, that's enough of a reason not to be in condition to have somebody cash in and beat you with their finish. So,
especially when they've been teasing the cash in with Priest. Regardless, it's like at any point in time he may cash in. He's not waiting for someone to be nearly carted off with an injury to do it.
Well, let's talk about Priest, since you brought him up, and
this is my segue.
That's a good segue. Actually, let's step aside. We'll take a break real quick here on the Nerdcast Empire. When we come back, we'll talk about Seth Rollins and Finn Balor and Damian Priest as well. You're listening to the Nerdcast Empire's review of SummerSlam. Back on the Nerdcast Empire. Matt Sexton here in studio, along with Mike and Rachel, and Chris Hall joining us from parts unknown. Actually, I know where he's from. We're not going to dox him here on the air, but we're going to bring Chris in first on this next one. Seth Rollins and Finn Balor for the World Heavyweight Championship, and it was Seth Rollins defeating Finn Balor with a stomp on the briefcase in 1810. Of course, that's kind of shortening what actually happened. There was a lot of consternation the last 2 or 3 minutes of that match, with the briefcase finally getting rolled in by Priest almost begrudgingly, and Balor didn't get the chance to use it. It was Seth Rollins who ended up stomping Balor's head on the briefcase and pinning him. Still a lot of drama with the Judgment Day, but in the end of the day, Seth freaking Rollins still the champion. Chris, your thoughts on the match and maybe what's going on with the Judgment Day? Because certainly a lot of layers to unpack from that one.
Yeah, it definitely swerved me. I had a lot of guesses right as far as who was going to win during this pay-per-view. I think a lot of it was cut and dry, but this one went the opposite direction on me. I was for sure that Balor was going to take the title and Judgment Day was just going to be champions or briefcase holders across the board, and instead now we get to watch what seems like the deterioration of Judgment Day. I don't think you could have gone wrong either way. Obviously, if Finn Balor would have won, Seth Rollins is more than capable of continuing on in another storyline or even bringing in a revenge feud back for the title. And obviously the storyline is going to go well with the Judgment Day breakdown. Overall, I think it was a great match. I think I mentioned early on I couldn't tell if there was a little bit of a sloppy opening, but due to a lot of quick camera cuts we saw, it was hard to tell if it was just camera work or them getting adjusted. But yeah, overall, great match. Love the ending. Happy to see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting to see where the Judgment Day goes, because I know there's been a lot of rumors about maybe Finn Balor's the next quote unquote leader of the Judgment Day that gets cast aside for somebody else. And obviously the most popular person in that group is Rhea Ripley. When she came out, the pop for her was ridiculous. And she's coming alongside the least popular person in WWE and Dominic Mysterio. So certainly makes for an interesting dynamic. Mike, your thoughts on that match?
First, just on the Mysterio and Rhea Ripley situation, I'm curious when the point's going to come where people start cheering for Dominic Mysterio because they hate him so much, kind of like the weird reverse psychology situation where it's like, this guy's so terrible, we love that about him, and we're going to cheer now, because I feel like there's going to come a time where that happens. But obviously Ripley's a huge star. She could easily be the leader of this group, or if they wanted to expand and bring in someone else, they could do that. My thoughts on the match, I wouldn't have had a problem with either individual winning. I think in some ways WWE kind of owes Seth Rollins, just based on how, when I think back to the Shield era, to me, he was the guy that you could put the company on his back and he could run with it. It seemed pretty evident early on that Reigns was their guy, but I thought Rollins was more the whole package. And, to think how many times he put over Cody upon his return, it's almost like this title reign. And maybe even the creation of the title is basically like saying, look, man, we appreciate what you've done. We've not always given you the best to work with, and you've excelled as much as humanly possible. And then along those same lines with Balor losing the title 7 years ago due to injury, I want to see him as a world champion again before it's all said and done.
Well, that tattoo that Michael Cole called a tattoo that was clearly paint marking the 7 years since that injury. And there were a lot of really nice callbacks in that match too, to that match 7 years ago, which was really well done. And yeah, both of those guys definitely deserve their flowers. And it was certainly a really good match. That the only downside right now to the Bloodline storyline is matches like that could main event a pay-per-view, even though I know they're calling everything a main event. And, that is what it is.
I think this is the main event.
Yeah, this is the main event.
4 main events tonight?
Yeah.
4 main events. And they're gonna count Lesnar's main event as adding to his record of number of main events. Like, dude, you went on second. The comment I made live was, I'm pretty sure Chris Jericho left WWE because they put him on second at WrestleMania. And now Brock Lesnar's wrestling second at SummerSlam, and it's a main event. You're going to have to explain that one to me because I'm not sure I understand that. But
well, it goes right along with them kind of treating the SmackDown leading into WrestleMania like it's almost also WrestleMania. Like,
right.
Nothing has a definitive end or beginning anymore. It's perfect.
Just we continue on. So this is probably still part of SummerSlam as well, or our podcast.
As far as I know.
I think so. Until I go to bed, it's still SummerSlam.
I believe this is Armageddon.
It could be. Which, speaking of not Armageddon, but the next pay-per-view for WWE will be Payback, and we'll have a review of that one coming up in a few weeks. So make sure you check that out on the Nerdcast Empire. Rachel, your thoughts on the World Heavyweight Championship? What's next for Seth freaking Rollins? Is it Damian Priest, which seems like could be, or does Damian Priest and Finn Balor have to deal with their issues and maybe somebody else is in line for Rollins' championship in the short term?
Well, I think you're right. I think Damian Priest eventually will go against Seth Rollins. If not in a real match, he'll eventually cash in, or at least attempt to cash in on Seth Rollins. I think that's the route they're going to go with that. I had Finn Balor win in tonight too. I really wanted to see that 7-year storyline, which really wasn't meant to be the storyline. Obviously, Finn Balor didn't mean to get hurt 7 years ago, but I expected that to be the outcome. I picked him last pay-per-view too, or premium live event. Didn't work out for me, but good match. I love Seth Rollins too. I think he's, like Mike said, he hasn't been given his due because of everything that's gone on and everyone else being involved in the company too. And like, he lost to Cody many times. But yeah, I wasn't going to be upset really either way. I think they always put on a good match.
And a few notes about them. We talk about our picks. You too can make picks. Pro Wrestling Scorecards is where you can do that. And eventually we'll open up a group for all of our listeners as well if they want to pick against us for these pay-per-views. Rachel was the winner tonight by 1 point, barring any late night scoring changes that might pop in there. But it's always a lot of fun and gives you another way to enjoy the pay-per-views by scoring the event as you go.
Yeah, I just had a couple other points regarding this match. I think the Balor storyline, it's bad enough that he had lost the title because of the injury, but you almost felt like there was this brief moment where Triple H was able to convince Vince and anyone else that Balor was top tier, and as a result of what happened, he just lost that and was never able to regain it. So you kind of feel like he needs that revalidation again to say, yeah, we do believe you're on top of this industry. And as far as Priest goes, the kind of nonchalant toss the briefcase in the ring, to me, it just tells me he wanted Balor to get his title shot out of the way so it can be in the rear view, and now he can focus on cashing in and not have to worry about who he might be cashing in on. So even if it's not a full blown, we want you out of the group, I think it's like dude, you had your chance a couple times, get out of the way.
And it kind of makes you wonder if Balor will then get in the way of a potential cash in because he continues to be bitter, because that bitterness isn't going away based on how that all turned out tonight. And maybe now his bitterness has turned toward his group mate instead of to Seth Rollins.
Exactly.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. A very good match, as you would expect, those two putting on another classic. Speaking of classic, it was 14 minutes of violence, as you would expect, but Gunther defends the Intercontinental Championship, defeating Drew McIntyre by hitting him with just about every finish he has in sequence, finishing up with a powerbomb in 13:44. Gunther closing in on the Honky Tonk Man's record for Intercontinental title reign. Rachel, we'll start with you on this one. Just another impressive outing by both of those guys, and Gunther again showing why if he's not the best wrestler in the world, he's certainly in the conversation.
Oh, definitely. And they put on a great match together for being two big guys and being able to move and do some of the things that they do. I mean, Drew McIntyre and his kip up alone, his height and his weight, that blows my mind because I usually only see all the smaller guys do that. 31 chops between all of them, that just sounds painful to me. But overall, I thought it was a great match. And Gunther, he just is dominant. I don't know who's going to end up beating him.
It would be easy to forgive you for pronouncing his name because you watch WWE's programming and they pronounce it 6 different ways. Well,
Michael Cole
show.
kept saying Gunther all night. So, yeah, I don't feel too bad.
Just wait till William Regal shows back up on TV at the end of the year. Who knows how he'll pronounce his name. But it was just another impressive outing. And again, Mike, Gunther just seems like every time he has these big matches, and we've seen it even back to his Walter days, it just seems like he brings the violence to a totally different level. His level of storytelling is among the best in all the industry.
To be honest, I'm still amazed that he has come where he has to this point. Like, he's one of those guys that seem like, yeah, he's great on the indies, but there's no way WWE would see that level of value in him. So to see both his body transformation and how WWE has basically endorsed him, saying, not only are we going to sign you, bring you up to the main roster, we're going to give you this amazing Royal Rumble run and IC title reign that very few people get to enjoy. And anytime someone can do, and I'm going to probably mention this later with another match, anytime someone can do what you think of as being trivial moves, but make them impactful and make them impressive, what more could you want? I mean, you're limiting injury risk. You're really just keeping it simple and not blowing a bunch of spots in one match. And it's still amazing. Like, every Gunther match is enjoyable when, you know, the vast majority of it is him just brutalizing people with chops and clotheslines and whatnot, German suplexes. Like, it's not rewriting how to wrestle. It's basic, but it's effective.
I think, like Jim Cornette says, it's really the modern take on a classic wrestling match. It is what at least he would like to believe could be modern wrestling today. Chris, obviously, Gunther really impressive. Drew McIntyre is an interesting case because, of course, he just came back, challenged Gunther, lost. A lot of talk about his contract situation and what that will look like going into 2024. What do you think will be next for Drew McIntyre, and your thoughts overall on the match?
Drew McIntyre, I don't think this is going to hurt him that much, just coming back and losing. Because, I mean, if you're going to lose to anybody, you would prefer it to be the guy that's about to break the overall record for the Intercontinental Championship. As far as where he goes, I couldn't really say, honestly. Without any sort of build-up going into any kind of storyline, it seems like he's kind of just there right now. But it'll be interesting to see if he tries to jump into any of the active storylines we brought up, you know, jumping into the Roman Reigns storyline or, you know, Damian Priest and his briefcase. As far as the match overall, this was my first time actually getting to sit down and watch a full Gunther match. I mean, I've heard about him. I haven't watched a pay-per-view, ironically, since last year's SummerSlam. So getting to sit down and watch a full match of him and not just clips, I was very impressed. I know Mike mentioned, you know, he keeps it simple, and clearly he does, but I also think he really goes back and it just seems like a classic wrestling match, like you mentioned. I love seeing a guy that can just go back and use a power bomb as a finishing move. I've brought it before. I love people that will go back and just use a DDT. But he brings something special in that you don't know necessarily how he might end a match. He doesn't have just that one finishing move. You know, he might do a frog splash, or we just saw him finish it with a Boston Crab the other day. I just love that classic wrestling.
Yeah, it's definitely a throwback, and I think it also makes his matches more unpredictable because you don't ever know where the finish is coming from. In this case, it was pretty obvious because he hit 2 or 3 big impact moves in a row, and that finished it off. But it is something different in this day and age of sometimes spam finishers where it's the NXT style, but it's not. That's really a little unfair to NXT. That's kind of where I know from. I think of like Cole Gargano, where it was like one kick out after another from a finish, but it's certainly the indie style where, you know, one finish isn't enough. You got to hit 10 of them, and then finally you'll finish them off. Gunther, one big power bomb, that might be it, or a clothesline.
And even with WWE, they've had, okay, this is the one move that this guy uses to finish matches, nothing else. And, you know, much to Chris's point, it's like I've seen Gunther win a match with a clothesline and a power bomb and a splash off the top. And like, it would be the equivalent of Bret Hart beating someone right after the inverted atomic drop. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, that's not when he pins the guy. But with Gunther, it can happen.
It certainly makes his matches really stand out across all of professional wrestling right now. We're going to take one final break on the program. We've got half the card to go. We're going to speed through those last 4 matches a little bit, and we'll run down the opening 4 matches and kind of talk about where they're going from here when we return here on the Nerdcast Empire. On the other side of the final break on the Nerdcast Empire, got the whole crew tonight, late night after SummerSlam, a really good pay-per-view event from WWE. We'll run on a couple of matches really quickly, and then we'll kind of spend a little bit more time on the first 2 matches tonight. Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler in an MMA rules match. Of course, big build up to this match was that everybody at least believes that Rousey's contract is coming to an end for the time being, and she kind of had a hard out. So she wanted to put over her friend Shayna Baszler in an MMA match. She certainly did just that, as Baszler wins by technical submission in just under 8 minutes. Mike, your overall thoughts on this match? Because I feel like it's going to get a little bit of unnecessary criticism. Again, kind of going back to the point we mentioned earlier, because some of the things that ended up off the card to give this a spot on the card. But at the same time, I feel like those two did what they were sent out there to do and did it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, first off, you can't argue with Ronda Rousey's star power. So if all of the things are equal, that's going to earn her a place on the card, I would think. And also, it's just, that's where we are. If her contract really is up, we have a hard stop coming up, and we need to get the story told. As far as the MMA rules, I'm never going to be too critical whenever they try something new with these events, because I think it can get stale really quickly. So anytime you can do something out of the box, I'm all for it. I think this kind of match style suited them better. It's going to look like a fairly ugly product, but it's supposed to. They're making it out as if they're legitimately having an MMA fight. It's not going to be pretty. I think the buildup was a little awkward at times, where I think you were supposed to believe Shayna was the face, but she's not like a pure baby face, so it didn't always come through. Having seen her work in NXT and kind of knowing where she's come from, I was convinced she was the face, so there was that. But otherwise, the match did what it needed to do. It didn't really overstay its welcome, and it ended the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, your thoughts on that match?
Yeah, if I had to pick a match on the card that I had to pick as my least favorite, it'd probably be this one. Mike already brought up just the MMA, mixing it with the WWE rules and just trying to almost combine them. It just seemed just wonky to me. But like you said, they went out there, they did what they were told to do, and there's not much more you can ask for it. They did what they could with what they were given. Hopefully in the future, if they want to try to go down this road of kind of mixing in other styles, they do it a little tighter next time. It almost came off as someone made an MMA match who had never watched MMA before.
I would agree with that. And the other thing I will say before I throw it to Rachel for some thoughts on this, the fact that it only got 8 minutes kind of makes me think that any thoughts they might have had about actually constructing a cage or putting up the fight pit, they just simply didn't have the time for that, which would have helped the presentation of the match, because we've seen fight pit matches. They, of course, came from NXT, which has been used, I think, once or twice on the main roster and has been used very successfully. They just clearly did not have the time for that. So they just basically put it in the ring. No NXT Underground or anything like that. So I think they could have helped them a little bit with the presentation of the match, even having an MMA official. I mean, you're kind of owned by the same company now, UFC and WWE. So you could have gotten somebody that maybe UFC people would have known, or even Daniel Cormier, bring him back. I think they dropped the ball for these two with little things that could have helped even a short match really stand out a little bit more. Rachel, your thoughts?
My biggest thought, I'm glad for Shayna, because someone who was so dominant on the NXT roster, I mean, decimating opponent after opponent, really has kind of floundered on the main roster. Maybe because Ronda's there, I'm not sure, but seeing her do what she does best against Ronda, who's one of the best to do it. And for Ronda to go out the right way, if she is leaving, as we have heard, she should have, it ended the way it needed to. She needed to lose as out of a respect. I've always heard that if you're leaving the company, you lose on your way out. So I'm glad for Shayna. It was what it was supposed to be.
I certainly hope they have plans for Shayna Baszler now that they've had Rousey put her over pretty cleanly. So now you need to make something of that. SummerSlam Battle Royal preceded that one. And of course, it was sponsored by Slim Jim. If Slim Jim would like to sponsor our podcast, and I don't know, I'm sure some of the people on this panel would probably eat a Slim Jim if we got a sponsorship from them.
Absolutely.
Or C4 Energy.
Or C4 Energy or Rocket Mortgage or everybody else. So that's another topic for another day. We can get into the sponsorship money that WWE made off this event. But what this really should have been called is the LA Knight Showcase, because really kind of felt like that. It went 11 minutes and 20 seconds after Omos entered. It was LA Knight eliminating Sheamus to win the Battle Royal to a mega pop. Just quick thoughts from everybody on this one, because Battle Royals generally are kind of terrible. There's a reason the Royal Rumble is so popular, because the staggered entrances kind of give you that drama that just isn't there when everybody's in the ring. But we'll start with Chris. Just quick thoughts on the Battle Royal and LA Knight winning it.
Look, I just got to ask you one question. Who's running the game? L.A. Knight. Yeah. I'm so excited he's finally won. Watching him, everybody thought he was going to be the Money in the Bank champion. We've just been waiting for him to finally get his push. And even though this is kind of a secondary win, it's nice to finally see him get the attention he deserves. He's amazing on the mic. He's clearly rounding out some of his in-ring ability. So, yeah, we all kind of saw I wish I could say we all saw the outcome, but we've also watched him get snubbed a couple times recently. But it's been nice to see him finally get over.
Sometimes with WWE, you're never quite sure if it's going to be that time where they give you what you want. That time they did. Rachel, your thoughts?
Same. I picked LA Knight to win. I even had Sheamus being the last one eliminated. He's just so over right now. We were talking about the meteorologist that uses catchphrases during his forecast and had it online. He's beyond over. I hope they do something more with him. I hope he gets into a title picture somewhere. It was good. I'm glad.
Mike, your thoughts?
Just a couple bullet points from the match itself. Apollo Crews, what are we doing with that guy?
They built him up so well in NXT. They had this whole storyline, the Braun Breaker feud, which was so good. If you haven't had a chance to check that out. They bring him back up. And like you said, they've done basically nothing with him.
Like, I really thought that the trip back to NXT was going to right the ship, and he was going to potentially earn gold there and then come back. And it just, somewhere along the way, it was like they just punted on the whole thing. Santos Escobar, he eliminated Theory during the event. I don't know if that bodes well for his attempt to win the U.S. title. You have Killer Cross or Karrion Kross and AJ kind of going at it during the Battle Royal for their feud along. And then as far as the LA Knight victory, it really felt like the kind of end to a Battle Royal that if this were 3 or 4 years ago, Sheamus would have won.
Yeah.
Like, despite the crowd being overwhelmingly for Knight, it would have been that, you want that guy? Well, you're not getting him. You're getting this guy instead. Like, there was that period of time where you kind of felt like WWE was booking in a contentious manner toward the fans. And it doesn't feel that way so much anymore.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think going back to Chris's point about the Money in the Bank, I think, yeah, it would have been great if LA Knight would have won. But for once, it was a situation where the guy that did win also still makes sense. Like, oh, Damian Priest won. He's another up and coming guy. He just had the big moment in Puerto Rico with Bad Bunny. And clearly the company sees something in him as a future star. So at least there, it's like, okay, they didn't just pick John Cena. John Cena's going to win it, LOL, you know? So yeah, I would agree with that. They're doing a much better job of giving the fans what they want. Speaking of giving the fans what they want, they gave them Cody Rhodes second tonight in one of the main events of SummerSlam against Brock Lesnar in the third and final match. And of course, had all the drama that a Cody Rhodes match would have. It was another great showing by Brock Lesnar, who again is really, in my mind, solidifying himself as one of the all-time greats. Cody Rhodes wins with 3 crossroads in 1730 to ended, and maybe most importantly, earned Brock's respect with a handshake and hug, and he raised his arm and pretty much bringing that storyline to a close. Mike, your thoughts on the trilogy wrapping up with Cody Rhodes as we would have expected, ending up on top?
I can't help but go back to the night after WrestleMania, when Lesnar turned on Cody and attacked him and then just mercilessly beat him, thinking, they're really doing this to us. Why is this happening? Like, Cody was supposed to win the night before. Why is this going on now? To where we are now after these 3 matches. And I can honestly say that should Cody go on and eventually become the world champion or the universal champion, I'll feel better about it knowing he's gone through this Lesnar trio of matches. I feel like there is something to be said for having him get through some obstacles within WWE upon his return, then just bringing him in from AEW and saying, you're going to be our champion.
They booked him strong, even with the loss at WrestleMania. Obviously, he didn't lose the entire lead up to it, including with a torn pec muscle against Seth Rollins in Hell in a Cell. And they continued to book him strong after that loss as well. And now he ends up getting the better of Brock Lesnar. And again, and I'll throw it to Rachel maybe for more on this. Brock Lesnar, I think for a lot of years, didn't get the respect. They just thought he was his character. He's a mercenary. He's a guy that maybe he's going to show up and do business. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's going to go into business for himself, but he's going to go down, I think, especially this last run that he's had, one of the all-time best, because he's been involved in some of the most memorable stories and matches over the last couple of years of anybody in all of wrestling. Oh,
definitely. I mean, back even when he started with WWE, I didn't really care much about him. He was just a big, strong guy. That was his gimmick. I just was not interested. But these last few years have been the most fun I've ever seen him have. His personality's been coming out. He's been hilarious to watch. He dresses up like a cowboy. I mean, he drove a tractor or like what was that last year? Some sort of piece
machinery, of equipment, yes.
And like lifted up the ring. Like, he's just been so fun to watch this time around. And I love that he gave Cody the respect at the end of the match. I loved seeing him not turn on Cody, because you always kind of wonder, like, okay, is this real? Is he really just going to, hug it out? And I like seeing Cody win clean. Like the first win, he was in a submission and rolled, kind of like put his shoulders on the mat and pinned him that way. So seeing him actually win clean was what Cody needs, I think.
And then that was the question I had leading up to all this is, we know who has to win. It has to be Cody, because if it's not Cody, then what are we doing? But how are you going to get there in a way that makes it feel like a definitive end to the feud? And they did that. They found a way to, Lesnar just kept throwing him out of the ring, and he kept climbing back in the ring, just yelling at him, stay out, take the count out. Even Michael Cole yelling at him, like, stay down. Like, what are you doing? He just, as the match went on, earned Brock's respect. It was almost like Brock went through a face turn during the match as he was trying to get Cody to just stay away and not fight back. And he kept fighting back and ended up winning the match. Chris, your thoughts on the match overall? And I think the big question we all wonder is Cody that guy? Is Cody the guy eventually, now that he's gone through these trials, he's had his hard times? Is he the guy to dethrone Roman Reigns at some point down the road?
Yeah, we've talked about just the differences in watching WWE now versus the unwatchable era that we used to put up with. And I think this match is the biggest example of how far it's come, because it's not just about the Brock Lesnar feud. It's about what Cody Rhodes had to put up with the last time he was in WWE. He's done so much with his career after he left. But I've always felt like the WWE and what they've done with his storylines in the past have always been a huge chip on his shoulder. And for them to show that they're not just willing to put him over, but they're willing to put him over Brock Lesnar on a huge stage, it just shows how far we've come. And a testament to Brock Lesnar. He's 46 years old at this point, same age as John Cena, and you get a lot of these bigger name guys that if they don't win, or they don't get booked to win, they just kind of fade out of existence. And then you get other guys that stick around, help build other talent. Not that Cody Rhodes needs any building at this point, but put other folks over. And I think to see Brock Lesnar have that sort of career right now, it's nice to watch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think 10 years ago, nobody would have thought that was where Brock Lesnar was going to end up.
No, definitely not. As far as Cody Rhodes being the guy, I wouldn't say he's the guy in WWE just yet. But what I will say is how they've booked this and the change that they've made in the company. He has the potential to be that guy, which is something that he was never given before.
I think that's a fair point, and I think if they're building to him beating Reigns, they're doing it in the right way. And I think even the most critical people who were upset after he lost at WrestleMania, to be honest, I was very critical at that moment. I certainly felt very deflated, especially after the night before where Owens and Zayn won the tag titles and felt like such a celebration. It's hard to argue at this point that wasn't the right decision, because right now it looks like Cody, I mean, it's not just that they're doing the woes now, they're singing his whole daggone song. And it's, it's not like Jey Uso's song that has like 8 words. Like it's a full song, and they just sing it and belt it out on the way down to the ring. The guy is so over that he's the white bread baby face that WWE could not make for years. They tried with John Cena, they tried with Sheamus, they tried with so many guys. They got that guy now in Cody Rhodes, and they're basically gift wrap that guy from AEW.
I think with that, you'd never have got to see Sheamus or John Cena struggle or not get picked as the guy. It's no different than how they wanted Roman Reigns to be that guy for so long. And really, it was creating a character where he's mad because they don't treat him like that guy that got him over. Like his acknowledge me thing. That's, how many years were they booking him as the top babyface and the crowd didn't acknowledge him? Like his current character is kind of the culmination of that.
You want to get somebody over, you just tell the crowd that he's not the guy. And you basically make them, it's what's happening right now with LA Knight. They don't think that LA Knight's going to be that guy. He's a guy that Vince wanted to make a manager. They wanted to maybe even get rid of him. So there's just that groundswell of support behind him, and who knows where that's going to end up.
When you think that age playing a factor in their reluctance to make LA Knight much of anything, but then you look at the ages of some of the people on this card that are still performing at a high level. I mean, you have your Lesnars, you have your Styles. Like, at this day and age, mid-40s is nothing.
I hope so. I hope that's the case, just firsthand. But I mean, you think of someone we saw on SmackDown last night, Bobby Lashley. You want to talk about a dude that
hasn't aged.
He looks exactly the same. It's terrifying, honestly. And I'm really interested to see what he and the Street Profits are up to. Yeah. We're going to keep an eye on that storyline moving forward. Final match, which was the first match of SummerSlam, Logan Paul and Ricochet. Of course, Logan Paul match had to go on first so he could go fly to Dallas to be alongside his brother in his boxing match. It was pretty much what you expected with Logan Paul and Ricochet, but interestingly enough, ending with Logan Paul using the brass knuckles to hit Ricochet and get the pin in 1802, which in my mind seems to think that maybe this feud between the two of them might not be over yet. Rachel, I'll let you get the first word in on this one, but certainly a lot of high spots, as you would expect. Maybe not as many as we thought there might be, but again, with that combined with the finish, maybe this feud between those two isn't quite done yet. I
agree completely. I think mostly because using the brass knucks, I think that Ricochet has to have some kind of rematch of some sort to get back at him. We talked about how good Logan Paul is, and he shouldn't be. They put on a great match, and they're just fantastic together. They've had spots in other matches with each other. I mean, the ending was goofy with the brass knucks, but it was a good match overall. I liked it. I wish Ricochet would have won, but again, I think there's going to be more to it than that.
So what you're telling me is Ricochet might want payback.
Dun, dun, dun.
Just so happens to be the next WWE Premium Live event coming up, and we'll see how that goes. It's a late night. I can throw those jokes in as late as this is, but we'll throw it to Chris next. And again, you want two guys that are high flying to lead off the card. Certainly the case there. Logan Paul has finally figured out that his real life persona makes him a very punchable heel, and Ricochet kind of the ultimate underdog. Your thoughts on that match?
I want to hate Logan Paul so bad. I do hate Logan Paul so bad, honestly. And it has continued to surprise me just how quickly he was able to get in the ring and just pick up on everything. I can't say I've watched a match he's put on that I haven't been impressed with, and honestly, that just makes me angrier. Like I don't want him to be good, but he's just so fun to watch. And honestly, it makes him kind of a different heel than what we've seen recently. You talked about how you get these guys that are so great at being bad and being heels that they wind up getting cheered. Logan Paul doesn't seem to have that effect. I mean, even though he's amazing in the ring and people recognize that, he still gets all the heat that he can. And it's just a nice breath of fresh air in today's industry.
The guy he reminds me of, and I know he's not as good a wrestler as this person, so I don't want to confuse the matter, but to me, he reminds me a lot of Will Ospreay right after his heel turn. He was still kind of in that transition phase between junior heavyweight and heavyweight, but a guy that, you know, maybe had said some things on social media that got people riled up. So he was a guy that some people just didn't like as a person, and he was now this heel character, but he also did these crazy moves. So kind of had that same vibe out of someone like Will Ospreay.
Logan Paul is about the perfect heel. Like Will Ospreay, he might have said some things that rubbed people the wrong way, but I don't know if people were convinced that he was just a horrible, irredeemable human being.
No.
And given his pedigree of being an indie wrestler, you're going to respect him. Even if you may not see eye to eye with him, there's a level of respect. So you're never going to truly hate him. Logan Paul is everything that makes a heel. He's, you know, based on his just being an influencer, honestly, is enough to be heel worthy. But, you know, he's been pretty sketchy, I guess, is maybe the best way to put that. Controversial. Maybe go with that.
That's probably a good way to say it.
Yeah. You know, there's been some controversy there. And it's bad when the person you already don't like happens to be really, really good at something, seemingly having put less work in than other people. I'm sure he's worked really hard to get there, but you don't see that. So all you see is this guy who's wrestled a handful of times that is just outstanding at it. And it's something that the best heels in pro wrestling can't be, because there's still that level of, oh, they're working. That's not exactly who they really are. That you're getting who Logan Paul is. It's authentic, and I don't think there's a heel in wrestling that can claim that.
I think you're exactly right there. And from everything I've heard, they're basically teaching Logan Paul on the fly. It's one of those things like, okay, these are the things you're going to need for this match, so we're going to teach you how to do those things, rather than here's how to do a lockup and here's how to, you know, basically he's getting reverse wrestling training, where it's like, you're going to need to do a buckshot lariat jumping out of the ring on Ricochet on the floor. Like,
that was wild.
Like, yeah, that's nuts. Like, it's nuts to see somebody do that in the ring. To do it from the ring to the floor, that's just crazy.
But it's like they have him do these moves because it'll trigger people too. Like it's another layer of here's how you're going to irritate somebody.
He does it very well, and he's very talented, and Ricochet is too. And again, I my gut tells me that whether it's Payback or somewhere down the road, maybe the Survivor Series, we're going to see those two in a ring once again, because there's certainly some unfinished business there.
Just one minor thing about that match, and I understand I'm one of the few people who don't follow him on social media, so I don't know any of the side characters to his little universe. So, like, I wish WWE would throw me a bone and say, here's the people that might show up at some point in time that you need to know about, so it doesn't look like some random person just started handing weapons to Logan Paul.
I think
that was about like the KSIs and all of those folks.
And at least have them dress up like a Prime Energy bottle. I mean, at least then I would understand.
And I was going to say that I think that's something they did well at WrestleMania, where it was like, okay, clearly these guys are with him. They're doing this Prime Energy thing. Like you immediately associated that. But like having a couple of his flunkies come to the ring with him on Raw or something, just to where it's like, I can recognize your face now. So if I see you handing him brass knuckles, I'll know that you're one of his dudes. And, you know, the surprise doesn't really work. I mean, for his people, I'm sure it's, I know who that guy is, but for the rest of us, not so much.
There are far more people that know who he is than don't know, as far as like the people that are watching Logan Paul. So I understand I'm kind of in the minority here. The other thing is, yeah, I hope this isn't over. And based on their styles, this screams some sort of gimmick match, whether it be Hell in a Cell or just something that they can be elevated and jump off and do ridiculous things. I think we need to see that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think we will see more of those two somewhere down the line. Obviously, Logan Paul, not necessarily there each and every week, but I think WWE will continue to bring him in, and I think it'll be a chance for Ricochet to get his win back and kind of elevate him potentially to Intercontinental title, U.S. title type picture, which would be good to see him back into that. And with that, we are wrapping things up on the Nerdcast Empire. I'm going to start with Chris, who joins us remotely tonight. We certainly appreciate Chris joining us tonight. But Chris, your final thoughts on the overall pay-per-view and what you thought of the whole thing?
After having not watched a pay-per-view for a year, this was a great return just to see what WWE has become, how believable the superstars have become. We talked about all the big names across the board and how when certain folks lose, it's not really affecting their character. They're not becoming less believable. And when whoever the other person might be in the match is winning, we truly believe it. You know, they deserve to win. So it's nice to see how it's changed since I last watched it.
Even just in a year, it's taken such a big jump. And I think it's just a testament to the writing and what they've done week to week and episode to episode has made such a huge difference. Rachel, your final thoughts on SummerSlam?
I think it was a solid premium live event. Definitely one of my favorite matches had been Cody and Brock. I love that one. But they definitely have put on another solid show, and I can't wait to see where they're going to go with Payback next month.
It'll be very interesting to see. And I called it a pay-per-view. It's just like I'll probably call Twitter forever. I'll be calling pay-per-views until forever because premium live event is just not something. It still sticks in my brain after all these years of PPVs. It's now PLEs.
It's also really weird to suggest to people that you're on X.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Twitter just makes more sense.
I think people might wonder what I'm doing on X if I tell them I'm on X.
Yeah.
And it just seems like a much sketchier place to be. So, Mike, your final thoughts on what was quite an event tonight, a little over 4 hour pay-per-view, premium live event, Peacock show, whatever you want to call it.
Premium live event, PLE for the win. No, that was a solid show. I can't help but still want more movement in the Judgment Day story. I want that to go somewhere, but we did get a cash in with the women's Money in the Bank, so I can't fault them for not pushing every storyline forward. I'll just be thankful for kind of a culmination of the Cody Brock story and something with Damage Control and EO.
And that is going to wrap things up for the Nerdcast Empire, Episode 2. We talked about SummerSlam. What an event it was. So glad you've joined us for another week of the Nerdcast Empire. I want to give a big thanks to Mike and Rachel and Chris joining me in studio and remotely right after the event. So we were able to get that podcast recorded and able to get it to you all for your listening pleasure. And of course, you can listen to our podcast anywhere you get podcasts. You can also check out our clips on our YouTube page. And of course, check out our website at nerdcastempire.com. A big thanks to Stove Leg Media as well for all they do to support our podcast. And again, a huge thanks to you all, the listeners, for joining us for week number 1. And we hope you join us again for week number 3 when we talk about more professional wrestling. We want to talk about some of our tastes in professional wrestling. That'll be coming up next Sunday when we upload our next episode of the Nerdcast Empire. For the entire Empire, I'm Matt Sexton saying so long. We will see you next week. Join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.